Hey guys, tonight we are stepping straight into the noisy, restless heart of ancient Rome. Picture yourself waking up, not in some marble villa with fountains and mosaics, but in a creaky little insula, one of those rickety apartment blocks jammed together like beehives. The walls are thin, the wood beams groan above you, and the smell of smoke from last night's oil lamps hasn't really cleared. You probably wouldn't survive this morning, honestly, because your landlord hasn't fixed the stairwell in months, and just climbing down might be your last gladiator-level challenge. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing whether you're drifting off at midnight in Chicago or sneaking in a nap at noon in Mumbai. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle awake to the sound of neighbors arguing in a language you half understand. Roman mornings don't wait for your comfort. Down in the alley, carts are already squeaking over cobblestones. Slaves are shouting as they haul water jars. And somewhere, a street vendor is calling out for customers with bread still warm from a smoky oven. You rub your eyes and realize there's no gentle alarm clock here, just chaos. The insula you live in is stacked 5, sometimes 6 floors high. Historians still argue whether the Romans actually regulated how tall these buildings could go. But one thing's certain: they were fire hazards waiting to happen. You hear a loud crash from above, a neighbor dropping a pot, or maybe part of the ceiling coming loose. Either way, you tense up, because one unlucky spark could send the entire building roaring into flames, and you'd have no escape ladder. As you step into the narrow hallway, the walls are chipped, plaster flakes off, and the air smells like yesterday's stew mixed with damp straw. It isn't glamorous. This is the part of Roman life Hollywood forgets. Most people weren't patricians strolling around in togas. They were packed into these apartments, praying the rent wouldn't go up again. Your landlord? He doesn't live here. He's off in his villa sipping imported wine, while you cough in the dust and hope your floor doesn't collapse. You shuffle down the dark stairwell. The steps are uneven, polished smooth by countless feet. Someone's left a bucket of waste halfway down, and you nearly kick it over. Don't ask what's in it. Outside, the morning light stings your eyes, but it's not fresh sunlight streaming through pine trees. It's pale, hazy, filtered through wood smoke, and it carries the unmistakable smell of manure. Romans had plenty of perfumes and oils, but none of them were strong enough to mask a whole city's worth of waste. Your stomach growls, but breakfast isn't pancakes or coffee. It's dry bread from the stall on the corner, maybe dipped in watered wine if you're lucky. If you're a laborer, that's all you're getting until midday. So you chew slowly, ignoring how stale it tastes. Sometimes they toss in olives, figs, or cheese. But today, it's plain, cracked loaf. You swallow and realize you'll be marching through this day without the fuel you're used to. A quirky little fact for you: some Romans believed that eating garlic in the morning gave you strength for the day. Soldiers swore by it. Imagine your entire barracks reeking of garlic breath while trudging off to war. Not exactly the minty fresh vibe. And yet, in your insula, garlic isn't on the menu. It costs more than you can spare. As you sit on a stone step, tearing another bite of bread, you notice children darting past barefoot, playing with little wax balls or wooden hoops. They laugh, but their feet are already calloused, their clothes patched with rough wool. You envy their carefree energy, until one of them slips on a pile of horse dung and skids across the alley. Welcome to Rome. Slapstick meets sanitation crisis. And then there's the noise. Metal clangs, animals bray, merchants argue at top volume. The city wakes like an orchestra of chaos, and you're just one more body trying not to get trampled. Even as you squint at the bright mosaic signs advertising wine shops and bathhouses, you know you'll never afford most of what they're selling. Rome promises grandeur, but mostly delivers grind. By now, the air is thick with wood smoke, bread ovens, and the occasional whiff of rotting cabbage from yesterday's trash heap. You pull your tunic tighter because it's drafty, even inside the city. Your neighbors cough beside you, some already hauling their tools off to construction sites or loading carts at the market. You trail along with them, because in Rome, if you sit idle too long, someone notices, and not in a good way. The truth is, this morning routine isn't built for comfort. It's built for survival. The empire may be rich, but you're not. You've got blisters from sandals that never fit right. You've got dust in your lungs. And you've got the gnawing sense that this city is just waiting to chew you up and spit you out. So you take another bite of that tasteless bread, you squint at the rising sun, and you brace yourself. Because this is just the first hour of your day in ancient Rome. You're still chewing that dry, flavorless bread as you shuffle down the street, and already your stomach is staging a rebellion. You think longingly of coffee, eggs, or maybe even a sweet pastry. But here in Rome, your choices are slim and uninspired. Breakfast, ientaculum, isn't a feast. It's survival fuel. If you're lucky, maybe you've got a few olives wrapped in a cloth from yesterday, or a crumbly piece of goat cheese that smells suspiciously stronger than it tastes. Most mornings, though, just stale bread dipped in watered-down wine. Congratulations, you're already malnourished. Historians still argue whether ordinary Romans consistently ate breakfast at all, or if it was more of an optional nibble for those with the means. But for you, the decision is made. Your grumbling stomach doesn't care about scholarly debates. It wants more. But the marketplace won't really come alive until later in the day. You lean against a wall to finish your humble meal. A neighbor trudges by carrying a clay jug of water balanced on her shoulder, her tunic stained with yesterday's sweat. The jug itself has little flecks of lime, because the aqueduct water isn't exactly sparkling clean. Romans bragged about their aqueducts, and fair enough, those stone marvels carried millions of gallons daily. But by the time the water sloshed into public fountains, it had already mingled with who knows what. You gulp it anyway, grimacing at the metallic tang, because dehydration under the Roman sun will finish you faster than bad hygiene. And speaking of hygiene, remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from Egyptian times? Romans didn't go quite that far, but they had their quirks. Some swore by smearing goose fat on their skin before heading outdoors, believing it blocked the sun. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but either way, you smell faintly of barnyard before noon. Not exactly a confidence booster as you blend into the crowd. The streets around you are buzzing now. Merchants shout, trying to lure early customers. One man has figs stacked in neat pyramids, another is slicing cheese that oozes in the heat. A baker is pulling fresh loaves from a clay oven, and the smell makes you briefly regret finishing your stale bread. But your coin pouch is pitifully light, and unless you're willing to haggle aggressively, or steal, breakfast isn't getting any better. You pass a small shrine tucked in a doorway, smoke curling from a tiny oil lamp. Someone's left an offering of bread and a few coins to the household gods, the Lares. You nod awkwardly. Religion here isn't something you schedule for Sundays. It's stitched into every alley, every mealtime, every corner. You whisper a clumsy prayer for strength, not entirely sure if the gods care about a tired human trudging through Rome. Your sandals slap against cobblestones slick with last night's rain. You nearly slip, because the Romans may have invented roads, but they didn't invent drainage that actually works. A wagon rattles by, its wooden wheels bouncing over stones, splattering mud across your tunic. You don't even shout. This is normal. By now the streets are filling with butchers hauling slabs of meat, fishmongers shouting about their catches, and beggars kneeling with outstretched hands. You're just one more hungry mouth among thousands. Somewhere nearby, a cockerel crows, late to the party. You wonder if roasted chicken might taste better than the grayish bread you just ate. Then laugh at yourself. Meat is rare for you. Maybe a festival treat, maybe a scrap tossed your way if you're lucky. For the wealthy, roasted boar and honeyed dormice are delicacies. For you, it's chickpeas and lentils, day after day, sometimes mashed into a thin porridge that tastes exactly how it sounds. Beige. And then there's wine. Not the rich, velvety kind you're imagining, but sour stuff watered down until it barely passes as juice. Romans thought drinking pure wine was barbaric, so everyone cut it with water. Even kids drank it. Your cup at breakfast tastes faintly of vinegar, and you swirl it around, wishing for coffee but knowing caffeine hasn't entered the Roman world yet. You take a sip anyway, because it's either that or plain water with floaties. By mid-morning, the sun is warming the city, and you're already sweating through your tunic. The bread sits like a stone in your stomach. Your jaw aches from chewing. You wonder how anyone powers through an entire day on this fuel, and the answer is, they don't. Most people save their strength for the main meal at midday, when bread and porridge are joined by maybe a few vegetables, or if fortune smiles, a scrap of meat. But for now, you're running on fumes. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. Some Romans actually use their bread as napkins, wiping greasy fingers on it, and then tossing it away for slaves or beggars to scavenge. Imagine working all morning, only to end up eating someone else's grease-soaked leftovers. Not exactly five-star dining. As you move along the street, your stomach grumbles again. You pat it gently, promising it better things at Prandium, the midday meal. But deep down, you know the menu won't change much. Barley mush, maybe beans, maybe dried fruit. Still, hope keeps you walking. Your day in Rome has barely started, and already you're running on crumbs and cheap wine. Your head feels light, your legs drag, and the city shows no mercy. Around you, life churns at full speed, demanding your energy. But with this breakfast, you won't last long. You step off the side street and into the main arteries of Rome, and immediately you regret it. The air is thicker, hotter, louder, and every sense feels assaulted at once. You dodge to the side as a mule-drawn cart barrels past, wooden wheels screeching, the driver swearing in Latin that you don't quite catch. A second later, a clay pot of something, definitely not water, gets dumped from an upstairs window and splashes near your sandals. Congratulations, you've survived breakfast, only to meet the true gladiator fight of Rome, navigating its streets. The cobblestones are uneven, each one polished by thousands of feet and hooves, but they're also slick with, well, let's just say sanitation wasn't top of the Roman to-do list. You skirt around puddles, careful not to lose your balance, and notice how the raised stepping stones line the road. They're the ancient version of crosswalks, but instead of painted stripes, they're chunky blocks designed so you can hop across without soaking your feet in sewage. Practical? Sure. Elegant? Not even close. Historians still argue whether traffic in Rome was restricted during the day or if carts and animals clogged the roads nonstop. Whatever the case, you're hemmed in on all sides. Vendors pushing their stalls, goats bleating, donkeys braying, and people shouting over the din. Every step forward feels like threading a needle in a thunderstorm. A beggar tugs at your sleeve, eyes hollow, hand outstretched. You pat your empty pouch apologetically and move on. A group of children runs past, laughing as they chase a hoop, and one nearly knocks you into a barrel of fish. The stench slaps you instantly. Fish scales glistening in the sun, buzzing with flies. You gag and stumble back. Rome doesn't hide its smells. It wears them proudly, layered like a perfume gone terribly wrong. And then there are the chamber pots. Remember the splash near your sandals? That wasn't an accident. Romans casually emptied waste into the streets, counting on the daily traffic to wash it away. You glance upward nervously now, half expecting another shower. One misstep, and you're ankle-deep in a mixture best left undescribed. Still, the chaos has its rhythm. Street musicians strum on lutes, women hawk garlands of flowers, and you catch glimpses of painted signs pointing toward taverns, bathhouses, and temples. It's like the city is one giant stage performance, and you're stuck in the cheap seats, shoved along by the crowd. You're hyper-aware of your sandals slipping on the stones, of shoulders brushing yours, of the smell of sweat radiating from everyone pressed against you. Mainstream fact time. Rome had over 1 million residents at its height, making it the largest city in the ancient world. Imagine cramming all those lives into narrow alleys and winding streets with no proper garbage collection. The result? A city that's both alive and suffocating, grand and grotesque, brilliant and brutal. As you edge past a butcher's stall, you notice a carcass hanging, its ribs exposed, flies swarming in black clouds. The butcher hacks away with a cleaver, spraying bits of fat onto the cobblestones. A stray dog darts in, snatches a scrap, and disappears into the crowd. You wipe your arm on your tunic, realizing you just got hit by flying meat juice. Not exactly the Roman postcard you were hoping for. Somewhere nearby, a man is shouting about cheap sandals, holding them up like treasures. You pause to look. Yours are already wearing thin, the straps biting into your ankles, but the price he's shouting makes you laugh bitterly. You'd have to skip 3 meals just to afford a pair. Comfort is a luxury you don't have. You trudge on, your feet aching, thinking wistfully of modern sneakers. Quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found graffiti scratched into Roman walls complaining about traffic jams. Yes, traffic jams. 2,000 years ago, someone was already moaning, "I can't get my cart through this mess." Suddenly, you feel a little less alone in your irritation. The past had its road rage, too. You duck into a side alley to escape the crush, but the reprieve is worse. The air is damp, shadows long, and you hear rats scurrying along the stones. The smell here is sharper, urine, mold, and something metallic, maybe blood. You quicken your step, heart thudding, because alleys in Rome aren't just quiet shortcuts. They're hunting grounds for thieves. Nightfall makes them worse, but even now, in daylight, you feel exposed. You emerge back onto a main road, chest tight with relief. Ahead, the Forum beckons with its towering columns and throngs of people. It's overwhelming, yes, but at least it's open space. You blend into the flow, letting yourself be carried by the crowd. Every shout, every scent, every shove of the elbow presses on your senses until you almost stop noticing. Almost. The truth is, you're exhausted already, and it's not even noon. Your breakfast hasn't given you energy. The streets have stolen what little patience you had, and the city itself feels like it's daring you to keep going. Rome isn't designed for survival. It's designed for spectacle. And you? You're one fragile spectator, just trying to make it across the street without being flattened by an ox cart. You shuffle toward a cluster of steam rising in the distance, the unmistakable sign of a Roman bathhouse. Your body aches from dodging carts and slipping across cobblestones. And though you're skeptical, the thought of warm water pulls you closer. The building looms larger as you approach, arches, columns, and a steady hum of voices drifting out. These aren't quiet spas. They're the social hubs of the city. You take a breath and step inside, bracing for the ritual that Romans call relaxation. The first thing that hits you is the noise. Echoes bounce off tiled walls, men chatting, splashing, laughing, even arguing politics at full volume. So much for peace and quiet. You squeeze past a group of locals and hand a coin to the attendant, who barely glances at you before pointing to the changing area. You strip down, clutching your bundle of clothes nervously, and pray no one notices the stains on your tunic or the holes in your sandals. The floors are slick with water, oil, and who knows what else. You nearly fall twice before catching yourself on a marble column. Around you, others move with practiced ease, carrying small flasks of olive oil, their skin glistening in the lamplight. You've got nothing but your nerves. A man with a crooked smile points you toward the apoditerium, the dressing room, where rows of niches hold sandals, tunics, and satchels. You hesitate. Thieves are notorious here. Leave your belongings unattended, and you'll walk home half naked. Historians still argue whether guards ever truly kept order in these places, but your gut tells you to keep your pouch close, even if it means bathing with one arm clutching your coins. You shuffle into the tepidarium, the warm room, where the air feels heavy, thick, and almost syrupy. The walls sweat condensation, and so do you. Your pores open, your shoulders loosen, but the heat is relentless. Men lie stretched on benches, chatting about horse races and gladiator matches. You sit awkwardly, not sure whether to join the conversation or pretend you belong. Either way, your skin is already prickling with sweat. Next comes the caldarium, the hot bath, and here the steam nearly blinds you. The water ripples with heat, and you step in slowly, yelping under your breath as your skin adjusts. Around you, others sink in with practiced groans, some slapping their chests like they're conquering the discomfort. You sink lower, finally letting your body float. For a moment, the aches fade, replaced by an odd sense of surrender. Then comes the scrubbing. A strigil, a curved metal scraper, is pressed into your hand by a bath attendant. You eye it like a weapon, but the man demonstrates, dragging it along his oiled skin to scrape off sweat, dirt, and old oil. You copy, grimacing as the tool squeaks against your arm. The grayish gunk that peels off is both disgusting and oddly satisfying. You remind yourself, Roman hygiene isn't soap and bubbles, it's olive oil and scraping. Congratulations, you're cleaner, but you smell like a salad. Quirky tidbit. Some Romans actually bottled the scrapings from famous gladiators, believing the mixture of sweat and oil had magical properties. People rubbed it on their skin as a cure for ailments or even as a love potion. Imagine standing in line at the market to buy a jar of someone else's scraped-off grime. You glance at your own strigil and shudder. No thanks. You move on to the frigidarium, the cold bath. The plunge is brutal, like ice water shocking your entire body. You gasp, eyes wide, heart pounding. But as the chill sets in, your muscles feel sharper, your senses clearer. Around you, Men laugh at newcomers' reactions, and you realize you've been the butt of their joke. You climb out, teeth chattering, but strangely refreshed. The baths aren't just about cleaning, they're about networking. Two men beside you argue about grain prices. Another boasts about his nephew's military posting. And a pair of older citizens swap rumors about the emperor's latest mistress. You feel out of place, like an uninvited guest at a loud dinner party. Rome, even at its most relaxing, is relentless. As you dry off, well, mostly drip off, you realize the ritual has stolen hours of your day. You're cleaner, but you're drained. Your stomach growls again, reminding you that your measly breakfast has long since worn off. The thought of food pulls you toward the market, even as your damp tunic clings uncomfortably. You step back onto the street, blinking against the harsh light. The world outside hasn't slowed for your bath. Carts rattle by, beggars call out, and smoke still curls from a nearby cookshop. You sigh, shoulders heavy, and start walking again. The bathhouse gave you a taste of comfort, but Rome has plenty of ways to snatch it back. You shuffle away from the damp comfort of the baths, only to hear a rising roar echoing down the street. It's not thunder, not a storm. It's thousands of voices all at once, chanting, laughing, jeering. You don't need anyone to tell you where it's coming from. The Colosseum dominates the skyline, that hulking oval of stone and arches, and today it's alive. The emperor has sponsored games, which means the whole city is pouring into the arena. Curiosity gets the better of you, and soon you're swept along in the human tide. By the time you squeeze through the archway, the sound is deafening. The place is enormous. Tier after tier of stone seats packed with bodies, the air buzzing with tension and sweat. You stumble into a spot high up in the cheap seats where the smell of garlic breath and cheap wine mixes with the sun-baked dust. Below you, the sand of the arena gleams, a pale canvas waiting to be painted with violence. A trumpet blares, and the crowd erupts. Out stride the gladiators, armored and gleaming, their helmets flashing like mirrors. The crowd roars their names, heroes, celebrities, slaves forced into spectacle, depending on who you ask. Historians still argue whether gladiators were beloved stars or disposable fodder, but as you sit there, you can feel both truths colliding. The man in the pit is cheered like a god, yet his life is about to hang on a stranger's thumb. The first clash is brutal. A Myrmidon with his heavy shield and gladius smashes against a nimble Retiarius, armed with just a net and a trident. The Retiarius whirls his net, misses, and the crowd groans in unison. A second later, the Myrmidon lunges, steel connecting with flesh, and crimson stains the sand. The sound isn't just heard, it's felt, like a punch in your chest. You wince, shrinking back, but the people around you surge forward, eyes gleaming, shouting for blood. A man beside you sloshes watered wine over his tunic, laughing as though this is comedy. A woman waves her scarf, shrieking encouragement. Children clap their hands as if it's a puppet show. You feel your stomach turn. The bread you ate earlier churns uncomfortably, and you realize this is entertainment here, a man's life reduced to a spectacle. Mainstream fact: Roman games weren't just gladiators. They included animal hunts, staged naval battles, and even public executions disguised as myths. Sometimes prisoners were dressed as characters from plays, only to be killed in ways that mirrored the story. Imagine watching Orpheus and the Furies performed live, except the ending isn't symbolic. It's a real death. That's your matinee show. And if the gore wasn't enough, there's the smell. Down in the arena, Wild animals are caged, snarling and pacing. You catch their musky scent as handlers prod them into place. Lions, leopards, even elephants, imported at great expense to die in front of cheering crowds. The gates crash open, and a lion leaps onto the sand, muscles rippling, mane wild. The roar it lets out is bone deep, primal. Your breath catches. The gladiator facing it grips his spear tighter, but you already know who has the upper hand. Around you, people chant louder, stomping their sandals on stone. It's intoxicating, terrifying, like being caught in a storm of voices. You want to leave, but the exits are blocked by the press of bodies. You're trapped, forced to watch as men bleed, animals collapse, and the crowd howls for more. You cover your eyes, but the sound, the sound, slips through your fingers. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind, absurd against the carnage. Some Romans treated gladiator blood as a cure for epilepsy. People would scramble after fights, scooping it up, drinking it warm. You glance down at the arena, at the crimson soaking into sand, and shudder. No thanks. The fight below drags on, both men staggering, shields dented, helmets askew. Finally, one collapses, trident clattering. The Murmillo plants his foot on the fallen man's chest, raising his sword. The crowd surges to its feet, fists pumping, voices unified. Jugula! Jugula! Kill him. You hold your breath as the victor looks up to the podium, waiting. The official gives a lazy gesture, thumb angled downward. The blade plunges and the Colosseum roars like it's been struck by lightning. You slump back against the stone, hollow. Around you, people chatter happily, as if they'd just seen a juggling act. A boy beside you gnaws on a honey cake, crumbs dotting his tunic while you fight the urge to vomit. This is what Rome calls leisure. You wanted a glimpse of their entertainment, and you got it, louder, bloodier, and more overwhelming than you could have imagined. You leave the arena shaken, ears still ringing, stomach queasy, legs trembling. And as the crowd spills back into the streets, buzzing with excitement, you realize the cruel truth. In Rome, violence isn't an exception. It's the main event. You stumble away from the Colosseum, ears ringing, stomach sour, trying to shake off the echo of the crowd's bloodlust. The roar still vibrates in your bones, even though the spectacle is behind you. You tell yourself you need air, food, something normal. But Rome has other plans. You follow the current of bodies spilling into the streets, and soon you're funneled toward the Forum, where the city hums at its loudest. The marketplace is a feast for the senses, though not necessarily a pleasant one. The smell hits you first. Imagine a stew made of fresh bread, grilled meat, rotting fish, goat dung, and perfume, all stirred together and left under the Mediterranean sun. Your nose wrinkles, but there's no escape. The Forum is packed tight, vendors shouting prices, animals braying, beggars singing out for alms. You push forward, clutching your thin coin pouch like it's a lifeline. Stalls line the square, stacked with goods from every corner of the empire. You pass heaps of olives glistening in oil, jars of honey sparkling golden, bolts of fabric dyed a purple so rich it might as well scream royalty. A fishmonger slaps down a massive tuna, its scales glinting before he slices it into hunks that reek in the heat. You gag, sidestepping, only to find yourself face to face with a butcher waving a pig's head on a stick like a carnival prize. Historians still argue whether the Forum was more a true market or more of a civic gathering space. But right now, it feels like both chaos and commerce wrapped together. Senators stroll by in crisp togas, their attendants clearing a path, while laborers jostle to buy barley, onions, and beans. You You just want to stretch your coins far enough to eat something that doesn't taste like cardboard. You shuffle toward a bread stall where loaves are stacked high, crusts cracking from the oven. The vendor's hands are white with flour as he slams one onto the counter. The smell makes your mouth water, but when he calls out the price, you hesitate. One loaf means half your daily coins gone. You sigh, hand them over anyway, because hunger wins every time. As you chew the fresh bread, warm, chewy, far better than the stale stuff you had this morning, you overhear two men arguing nearby. One insists Egyptian grain shipments are late again. The other blames corruption among the officials. Grain shortages are no joke in Rome. Riots have erupted over less. You swallow uneasily, realizing your full stomach depends on politics you'll never control. A quirky tidbit: some vendors actually dyed their wine or sprinkled chalk in it to make it look fuller, cheating customers who couldn't tell the difference. Others sold fish sauces diluted with seawater. You glance suspiciously at a stall where a man is ladling out garum, that infamous Roman condiment made of fermented fish guts. The smell alone is enough to curl your toes. People buy it eagerly, pouring it over everything from bread to fruit. You step back quickly, deciding your bread is fine plain. The noise builds as the crowd thickens. You're shoved left, then right, pressed against strangers until your ribs ache. A child tugs at your sleeve, eyes wide, asking for a coin. You shake your head, guilt twisting in your gut. A woman brushes past, her basket filled with figs, their purple skins splitting to reveal sweet flesh. Your stomach growls, but your pouch is already lighter. Everywhere you look, there's something clamoring for attention. Jugglers toss knives, a man sings off-key while banging a drum, and a snake charmer lets his pet slither across children's shoulders. The sensory overload is dizzying, and you feel your breath shorten. The Forum is magnificent, yes, but it's merciless, grinding you down with its endless noise and smells. You step to the side, clutching your bread, and catch sight of the temples rising above the market. Their columns gleam in the sun, their steps lined with worshippers lighting incense, making sacrifices, whispering prayers. For them, the gods are as present here as the vendors. You close your eyes for a moment, trying to block out the chaos, but the shouts drag you back instantly. Your coin pouch now feels pathetically empty. A loaf of bread and nothing else. You'll have to stretch it until tomorrow, unless some miracle, or more likely some shady deal, falls into your lap. You sigh and push your way back through the press, exhausted, head pounding. The Forum is the heart of Rome, yes, but it doesn't beat for you. It beats for profit, power, and spectacle. And as you slip away with crumbs stuck to your tunic, you realize surviving in this city isn't just about food. It's about surviving the relentless crush of people, the smells, the scams, and the sense that Rome itself is testing you with every step. You clutch your meager loaf and drag yourself away from the Forum, weaving through alleys that reek of smoke and sewage. It feels like the city is squeezing you, the walls leaning closer, the streets narrowing. Just when you think you've caught your breath, you run straight into something heavier than hunger, louder than markets, and sharper than the stench of fish guts, Roman law. It's not subtle. A pair of lictors march past, rods and axes bound in fasces slung over their shoulders, like walking warnings. People clear the way, eyes lowered. You freeze for a moment, bread tucked under your arm, wondering if you've done anything illegal without realizing it. It wouldn't take much. In Rome, rules aren't friendly guidelines. They're iron bars closing in around you. You remember the chatter you overheard earlier about grain shortages. Riots can flare up, and when they do, soldiers don't hesitate to swing clubs or worse. That's Roman law for you. Order at any cost. Justice doesn't really mean what you think it does. It bends depending on your class, your friends, and how much silver you can slide into the right palm. Historians still argue whether Roman law was truly advanced for its time or just brutally pragmatic. On paper, you've got the 12 Tables, the foundation of Roman justice. They cover everything from contracts to family disputes to, oddly enough, how loud funerals can be. But in practice, you're no senator, no wealthy patron. You're just another body in a city of 1 million, and the law sees you more as a potential problem than a person. You wander past a small crowd gathered around a magistrate's platform. 2 men are shouting, red-faced, waving their arms as the official listens with barely concealed boredom. The dispute? Land boundaries, maybe? Or unpaid debts? The magistrate finally raises a hand, mutters a few words, and one man storms off in rage. The other smirks, because apparently he had the better lawyer or the better bribe. You realize quickly, don't expect fairness here. Expect hierarchy. And if you mess up, punishments aren't light. Theft might mean flogging, branding, or worse. Slaves can be executed for crimes that would earn a free citizen only a fine. Some offenders are tossed into the arena you just fled, their death's entertainment for the masses. You hug your bread tighter, reminding yourself, keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your hands clean. Still, the system has its quirks. Did you know Roman citizens sometimes carried little lead tokens called tesserae? They were like tickets for free grain distributions. Sounds generous, but it was less about kindness and more about keeping the mob fed and docile. If you're lucky, you might snag one of those tokens someday, but looking at your frayed tunic and empty pouch, luck seems to be in short supply. A group of children rush past, knocking into you, and your heart leaps as your bread nearly tumbles from your grip. One of them cackles, holding up someone else's coin purse, then vanishes into the alley. Petty theft is everywhere. Yet you know if the wrong person catches those kids, their punishment will be far harsher than the crime. Roman justice has no patience for the powerless. The weight of it presses down as you keep walking. Every wall, every guard, every rule seems designed to remind you that you're small, replaceable, and utterly at the mercy of forces bigger than yourself. You catch a glimpse of the Senate building in the distance, its white columns glowing in the sun, and for a fleeting moment, you wonder what it'd be like to stand in there, your voice booming across the chamber. Then reality crashes back. Those halls aren't for people like you. They never will be. A scholar once wrote that Rome's laws were a gift to civilization, the roots of modern justice. Maybe that's true in theory. But as you shuffle past the lictors, clutching bread like it's contraband, you realize something else. In ancient Rome, the law doesn't protect you. It survives at your expense. And if you make the wrong move, if you say the wrong word, it will crush you without hesitation. You clutch your meager loaf and drag yourself away from the forum, weaving through alleys that reek of smoke and sewage. It feels like the city is squeezing you, the walls leaning closer, the streets narrowing. Just when you think you've caught your breath, you run straight into something heavier than hunger, louder than markets, and sharper than the stench of fish guts. Roman law. It's not subtle. A pair of lictors march past, rods and axes bound in fasces slung over their shoulders like walking warnings. People clear the way, eyes lowered. You freeze for a moment, bread tucked under your arm, wondering if you've done anything illegal without realizing it. It wouldn't take much. In Rome, rules aren't friendly guidelines. They're iron bars closing in around you. You remember the chatter you overheard earlier about grain shortages. Riots can flare up, and when they do, soldiers don't hesitate to swing clubs or worse. That's Roman law for you, order at any cost. Justice doesn't really mean what you think it does. It bends depending on your class, your friends, and how much silver you can slide into the right palm. Historians still argue whether Roman law was truly advanced for its time or just brutally pragmatic. On paper, you've got the 12 Tables, the foundation of Roman justice. They cover everything from contracts to family disputes to, oddly enough, how loud funerals can be. But in practice, you're no senator, no wealthy patron. You're just another body in a city of 1 million, and the law sees you more as a potential problem than a person. You wander past a small crowd gathered around a magistrate's platform. 2 men are shouting, red-faced, waving their arms as the official listens with barely concealed boredom. The dispute? Land boundaries maybe, or unpaid debts. The magistrate finally raises a hand, mutters a few words, and one man storms off in rage. The other smirks, because apparently he had the better lawyer or the better bribe. You realize quickly, don't expect fairness here, expect hierarchy. And if you mess up, punishments aren't light. Theft might mean flogging, branding, or worse. Slaves can be executed for crimes that would earn a free citizen only a fine. Some offenders are tossed into the arena you just fled, their death's entertainment for the masses. You hug your bread tighter, reminding yourself, keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your hands clean. Still, the system has its quirks. Did you know Roman citizens sometimes carried little lead tokens called tesserae? They were like tickets for free grain distributions. Sounds generous, but it was less about kindness and more about keeping the mob fed and docile. If you're lucky, you might snag one of those tokens someday, but looking at your frayed tunic and empty pouch, luck seems to be in short supply. A group of children rush past, knocking into you, and your heart leaps as your bread nearly tumbles from your grip. One of them cackles, holding up someone else's coin purse, then vanishes into the alley. Petty theft is everywhere. Yet you know if the wrong person catches those kids, their punishment will be far harsher than the crime. Roman justice has no patience for the powerless. The weight of it presses down as you keep walking. Every wall, every guard, every rule seems designed to remind you that you're small, replaceable, and utterly at the mercy of forces bigger than yourself. You catch a glimpse of the Senate building in the distance, its white columns glowing in the sun, and for a fleeting moment, you wonder what it'd be like to stand in there, your voice booming across the chamber. Then reality crashes back. Those halls aren't for people like you. They never will be. A scholar once wrote that Rome's laws were a gift to civilization, the roots of modern justice. Maybe that's true in theory. But as you shuffle past the lictors, clutching bread like it's contraband, you realize something else. In ancient Rome, the law doesn't protect you. It survives at your expense. And if you make the wrong move, if you say the wrong word, it will crush you without hesitation. You're still hugging that loaf of bread like it's treasure when the sun starts sliding toward late afternoon. Your stomach growls again. Rome chews through hunger faster than your coin purse can keep up. But tonight, you've somehow been invited, or dragged, into a Roman dinner party. At first, you imagine a cozy meal, maybe some roasted chicken, a bit of wine, laughter by lamplight. Then reality slaps you harder than the gladiator's shield you saw earlier. A servant leads you into the host's domus, and immediately you're struck by the marble floors, the frescoes of gods and heroes, and the faint smell of incense mixing with cooked meat. You try to stand tall, pretending like you belong, but the truth is written in the frayed seams of your tunic. You're an outsider here, a nobody who just stumbled into someone else's theater. Instead of chairs, you find couches, low, wide, draped with cushions. Romans don't just eat, they recline, propped on their left elbows, reaching lazily for food with their right hands. You awkwardly copy the posture, but it feels like a slow collapse. Your elbow wobbles, your back aches, and your neck cricks as you try not to slide face first into the platter in front of you. And then the food arrives. Platters upon platters, each stranger than the last. First, some olives and cheese. Fine, you can handle that. Then stuffed dormice appear, tiny rodents plumped with minced pork and herbs. You freeze, wondering if this is a prank, but the guests pop them into their mouths with delight, licking their fingers. A tray of jelly-like fish sauce desserts follows, wobbling unnervingly. You take the safest bet, a fig. Sweet, sticky, blessedly normal. Historians still argue whether Roman banquets were more about genuine hospitality or raw displays of wealth. Tonight, it feels like both. The host beams as servants pour wine mixed with water into shallow cups. Everyone drinks, laughs, and brags, their voices echoing off the painted walls. You sip cautiously, but the wine is sharp, heavy, and far stronger than what you're used to. Soon the room feels warmer, your head buzzing, your elbow sliding lower on the couch. A mainstream fact. Roman banquets often stretched for hours, with entertainment woven between courses. Tonight, you endure poetry recitals delivered in booming voices, a flute player whose notes squeak uncomfortably, and even a juggler who nearly drops a torch on your neighbor. The others clap and cheer. You force a smile, secretly wishing for just a quiet nap. The conversation swells around you. Politics, gossip, philosophy. One man argues that Julius Caesar was a visionary, while another sneers that he was nothing but a tyrant. A woman chimes in about the latest scandal involving a senator's affair. You try to follow along, but it's like watching a game where everyone knows the rules except you. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you nibble another fig. Romans sometimes served dishes dyed with exotic colors, like peas tinted purple, just to show off. Tonight, a bowl of something that looks suspiciously like green porridge lands near you. You poke it with your finger, decide against tasting it, and focus on your bread instead. The longer the night drags on, the louder the room grows. Guests recline further, voices slurring, wine sloshing across the floor. Someone laughs so hard they spit garum onto the tablecloth. Another man passes out mid-sentence, snoring loudly, while a servant quietly drags him aside. You glance toward the door, wondering if it's polite to escape yet. But no. Dessert arrives. Dates stuffed with honey and nuts, sprinkled with pepper. Odd, sweet, and sharp at the same time, like a prank your taste buds aren't in on. You chew slowly, hoping it'll sober you, but the warmth in your head only deepens. At last, the host claps his hands, signaling the end. Lamps gutter low, shadows stretch, and guests stumble out into the night air. You follow, stiff from reclining, dizzy from wine, sticky with figs. The streets are cooler now, but darker, the noise of the dinner fading into the hum of the city at dusk. Your stomach may be full, but your mind is frayed. The Roman dinner wasn't a meal, it was a test. You failed the posture, dodged the dormice, fumbled the conversation. And as you stagger into the night, you realize survival here isn't just about food or law. It's about playing a role in someone else's performance and hoping you don't trip over the props. You stagger out from the dinner party, head buzzing from the watered wine that still somehow feels like it's hammering your skull. The cool night air is a relief, but you don't get long to savor it. Almost immediately, you pass a shrine, then another, then another. Rome doesn't let you forget its gods. They're everywhere, staring at you from corners, crossroads, courtyards, and doorways, as if daring you to skip your prayers. The first shrine is to Janus, the two-faced god of doorways and beginnings. A little oil lamp flickers inside, casting shadows across his strange double visage. You pause, because you don't really know the proper words. You mumble something awkward, hoping it counts. After all, who wants to offend the guy who literally controls entrances and exits? A few steps later, you find a tiny altar to Lares, the household guardians. Someone's left figs, still warm from the sun, as offerings. You eye them hungrily, but you know better. Take food from a god's plate, and your bad luck won't just be a stubbed toe. It'll be your whole life unraveling. So you shuffle on, stomach protesting, wondering how Romans keep all this ritual straight. Historians still argue whether religion in Rome was deeply heartfelt or just a kind of social obligation. But to you, it feels like a constant checklist. Forget to sprinkle salt here, miss a libation there, and suddenly you're the reason the harvest fails or the army loses a battle. No pressure. You hear chanting in the distance and follow the sound until you reach a larger temple, steps thronged with worshippers. Incense clouds drift, sharp and sweet, while priests in spotless robes wave their arms in practiced rhythm. You linger at the edge, watching as animals are led up, sheep, goats, even a bull, destined for sacrifice. The crowd cheers when the blade flashes, and the priest interprets the entrails with grave authority. You gag, remembering the gladiator's blood not long ago. Here, too, death fuels the city. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some Romans carried little amulets shaped like phalluses, yes, that exact shape, as protection from the evil eye. You spot one dangling from a vendor's stall, swinging like a bizarre wind chime. You blink, then laugh nervously, because apparently sacred power comes in very odd forms. As you wander, you realize religion isn't just public, it's private, woven into every daily act. Tossing salt over your shoulder, whispering thanks to Vesta when your cooking fire catches, tapping an amulet before crossing a busy street. For Romans, the divine is less about belief and more about constant negotiation. The gods are picky neighbors. You keep them happy, or you risk their wrath. Your wine-dulled brain struggles to keep up. You stumble again upon another shrine, this one tiny and tucked into a wall niche. Someone has scrawled graffiti nearby. Prayers mixed with crude jokes, gods invoked alongside insults. It makes you chuckle, and for a moment, you feel like maybe religion here isn't just suffocating. It's also deeply human, messy, and imperfect. But as darkness deepens, torches flickering in the streets, a chill seeps into your bones. The city feels different at night, quieter, yes, but also more ominous. The shrines glow faintly in the shadows, the statues watching as you pass, their stone eyes unblinking. You murmur a clumsy prayer to whoever might be listening, because at this point, you'll take all the protection you can get. Your day began with cramped apartments and smoke. It's taken you through markets, baths, games, and banquets. Now you understand something else. Survival in Rome isn't just about food, laws, or money. It's about keeping the gods on your side, or at least keeping up the appearance that you've tried. Because here, faith is less about comfort and more about survival. The night air cools your flushed cheeks as you shuffle away from the temple steps, your head still clouded with incense and wine. The glow of altars fades behind you, and your mind drifts to something far more earthly. How in the world you're supposed to earn enough to get through tomorrow. Rome doesn't wait for prayers to fill your stomach. It demands labor. And not the cozy, put in a shift and get a paycheck kind. No, here, work is brutal, relentless, and rarely dignified. As dawn breaks the next day, you trail after the flow of workers heading toward their trades. The city hums awake. Smiths hammering, bakers stoking ovens, street vendors shouting before the sun even clears the rooftops. You pause at a construction site where half-naked laborers haul heavy stones, their backs slick with sweat even in the cool morning air. Whips crack when someone slows down. You quickly decide masonry isn't for you unless you want to collapse before noon. Historians still argue whether free citizens actually worked these jobs or left them mostly to slaves and freedmen. What's clear to you, standing here, is that slavery underpins almost everything. Slaves scrub floors, haul grain, tend children, and even run shops. Their labor keeps the whole city humming, and their suffering makes your own exhaustion look almost enviable. You wonder what side of that divide you'd really fall on if you stayed here long enough. Mainstream fact: a Roman baker's day started around midnight. By the time the city woke, bread was ready, pulled from massive communal ovens. You pass one now, the air rich with smoke and yeast. Workers sweat as they shuffle loaves into baskets. It looks steady, dependable, but also monotonous, choking hot and backbreaking. Still, your stomach growls as you remember yesterday's loaf disappearing too quickly. You wander on, bumping into other trades. A leather worker slaps hides onto a bench, scraping hair off with a curved blade. The smell of tannins burns your nose. Down the street, a potter spins a wheel, hands caked in clay, shaping vessels that will soon hold oil or wine. Each trade is loud, messy, and endless. Rome doesn't do work-life balance. Rome does survival through toil. And if you're unlucky, you might end up in the sewers, literally. Cloaca workers descend into the belly of the city, wading through filth to keep the drains from clogging. The pay might be slightly better, but the risks are constant. Disease, collapse, suffocation. You shudder and step away from a man emerging from a sewer grate, his tunic stained, his face pale, his eyes tired. A quirky tidbit catches your ear as you pass a barber's stall. Barbers here don't just cut hair, they also pull teeth and lance boils. Imagine getting your hair cut and a minor surgery in one sitting. You quickly decide shaggy hair is preferable to sharing a razor with half the Subura district. Of course, some jobs are glamorous, at least compared to hauling stones or scrubbing drains. Actors strut in theaters, though most are considered barely better than beggars. Charioteers whip their horses to fame and riches, but the risk of being trampled or shattered on the Circus Maximus track is so high it makes gladiator fights look safe. You picture yourself in a chariot, wind in your hair, only to instantly imagine the crash. No thanks. By mid-morning, your feet ache, your ears ring from hammers and shouts, and your chest feels tight with the realization: Rome doesn't care what you want to do. Rome decides for you. You're another cog in the machine, sweating for bread, scraping for coins, hoping to dodge injury long enough to see another sunrise. You stop by the Tiber's edge, where dock workers heave amphorae of wine and oil off creaking ships, A man slips, an amphora smashes, and red wine bleeds across the planks. The overseer shouts, fists waving, and the unlucky worker stumbles back, eyes wide with fear. The loss will likely come out of his pay. You turn away, clutching your chest, because it's clear. In Rome, a broken amphora is worth more than a broken body. By the time you limp back into the bustle of the streets, the lesson is carved deep. Work here isn't a career, a path, or even a calling. It's punishment by another name. Rome doesn't care if you hate your job. It only cares that you keep doing it until you drop. Your legs are heavy from wandering the city's trades, and you start to feel that dull ache in your temples that whispers you're not well. Maybe it's the wine from last night. Maybe the fish stench from the market still clinging to your nose. Or maybe it's the fact that in Rome, sickness lurks around every corner. You glance at your fingernails, already blackened with grime from touching too many walls, too many coins, too many doorways. A cough rattles in your throat, and you wonder, what happens if you get really sick here? Spoiler, you're in trouble. There are no clean hospitals waiting with soft beds and kind nurses. What you get instead are herbal concoctions, amulets, and a whole lot of guesswork. The average Roman doctor is either a Greek physician, a barber moonlighting with knives, or a quack with more confidence than skill. Historians still argue whether Roman medicine was advanced or mostly superstition wrapped in fancy words. But from where you're standing, sniffling and anxious, you wouldn't bet your life on it. A mainstream fact: one of the most famous Roman doctors, Galen, wrote volumes of medical texts that shaped medicine for centuries. He dissected animals, studied gladiators' wounds, and believed the body was governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you're sick, they'll bleed you with a knife, hoping to rebalance your humors. Congratulations, you're weaker and still coughing. You stop by a stall where a man sells bundles of herbs tied with string: fennel for digestion, rosemary for memory, mint for breath. You consider buying a sprig just to chew, but the vendor insists on a higher price than your pouch can bear. He rattles off remedies for headaches, fevers, even infertility, each one sounding more desperate than the last. A woman beside you buys a jar of honey mixed with ground-up oyster shells, swearing it cured her cousin's cough. You raise your eyebrows, but keep your coins tucked tight. A quirky tidbit: some Romans believed a cure for rabies involved pressing the ashes of a dog's head into the wound. Another claimed that wearing a piece of wolf's hide could ward off fevers. You picture yourself wrapped in animal skin, hacking up a lung, and can't decide whether to laugh or cry. And then there are the public baths, the same ones you shuffled through earlier. Yes, they keep you cleanish, but they're also petri dishes of germs. Imagine hundreds of people soaking in the same pools, scraping dead skin with strigils, coughing openly into the steam. The baths are less spa retreat, more bacteria buffet. You shiver at the thought, realizing every time you dip in, you're gambling with your health. You wander down an alley and spot a healer setting bones. A boy wails as his arm is yanked straight and splinted with sticks. The healer wipes sweat from his brow, then casually dips his hands into a basin of murky water. No soap, no sterilization, just a shrug and back to work. You take a step back, clutching your chest, silently begging your body not to betray you. Of course, religion creeps in too. Priests promise cures if you offer sacrifices, pour libations, or sleep overnight in certain temples. Maybe the gods will heal you in a dream. Maybe they won't. Either way, you're lighter in coins and heavier in desperation. Your cough lingers, the back of your throat scratchy. You eye the herb seller again, then remember the barber's extra services you overheard. Lancing boils, pulling teeth, bleeding customers until they faint. You decide to tough it out. After all, sometimes the cure here sounds worse than the sickness. By the time you limp away, you understand the truth. In Rome, health is a gamble. If the gods don't get you, the germs might. And if the germs spare you, the cure could still finish the job. The cough clings to your throat as you trudge onward, but you remind yourself that sickness is only one threat in Rome. Another waits just outside every doorway, creeping through every alley, fire and filth. You didn't notice it much at first, the chaos of gladiators, the clamor of markets. But now, as your eyes adjust, the danger becomes impossible to ignore. The streets are choked with wooden tenements stacked high like tinderboxes. Balconies jut out over alleys so narrow you could shake hands with a neighbor across the way. Oil lamps flicker in windows, braziers glow red in kitchens, and every ember is a risk. You shudder, remembering that Roman fire brigades weren't just firefighters. They were businessmen. They often demanded payment before putting out flames. If you didn't pay, well, too bad for your home. Historians still argue how effective Rome's firefighting system really was, but one fact stands out. The city burned more than once. The Great Fire under Nero is the most infamous, though whether he fiddled or not is still debated. Looking around at these swaying wooden insulae, it's a wonder they don't burn every week. A mainstream fact. Some insulae reached 6, even 7 stories tall. Imagine creaking staircases, oil lamps wobbling in drafts, and kitchens squeezed into corners. One spark, and the whole building would be a torch. You glance up nervously at your own cramped lodging, suddenly very aware of how much dry timber surrounds you. And then there's the filth. The streets double as open sewers, with chamber pots dumped from upper windows. You've already dodged one flying splash, but here, the stench is unavoidable. The gutters run thick with waste, mixing with rainwater into sluggish streams that crawl downhill toward the Tiber. Rats scurry across your path, fat and bold, their eyes gleaming. A quirky tidbit. Romans used human urine in laundry. Fuller's workshops collected it in giant jars because the ammonia helped whiten clothes. You actually pass one of these jars at a street corner, men relieving themselves directly into it. The smell nearly knocks you flat. You stumble back, covering your nose, but the laughter of passers-by tells you this is perfectly ordinary. You press on, but the hazards keep multiplying. At one corner, a cart tips over, spilling garbage and fish guts. At another, a drunken man trips, his torch skittering dangerously close to straw litter. You stamp it out instinctively, heart racing before realizing nobody else seemed bothered. For them, this is daily life. For you, it feels like balancing on the edge of disaster. Even the aqueducts, Rome's pride, don't guarantee safety. Yes, they bring water, but the pipes are lined with lead. Historians debate how much poisoning this caused, but when you taste the metallic tang from a public fountain, you don't need a degree to know it's not healthy. You spit, wiping your mouth, wishing for clear mountain water you'll never see here. Night falls, and the dangers only sharpen. Oil lamps cast weak pools of light, but shadows are everywhere. The alleys reek worse in the cool air, the sewage slowing, the rats bolder. Fires glow in distant windows, making your stomach twist with dread. You imagine flames leaping across rooftops, smoke choking you before you can reach the street. And yet, Romans endure it. They joke about the smells, They shrug at the fires. They keep trudging through muck as if it's nothing. You try to imitate them, lifting your tunic hem as you cross another foul stream. But inside you're rattled. Rome is glorious, yes, but beneath the marble temples and cheering crowds, it's a tinderbox swimming in filth. One spark, one spill, one careless torch, and everything, including you, could vanish overnight. You push forward, nostrils still stinging from the ammonia stink of the fuller's jar, and ears tuned for the crackle of fire. But now another presence looms over you. Politics. Not in the quiet backroom sense, but in the grand marble and toga theater that defines Rome. You catch sight of the Senate House, its white columns gleaming like the teeth of a smug patrician. People whisper as they pass, casting furtive glances as if just walking by lends them importance. For a moment, you let yourself imagine what it would feel like to stride up those steps, toga crisp, attendants fawning, ready to steer the fate of the empire. But then reality slaps you harder than the fishmonger's tuna. You're not a senator. You're barely a speck. The politics here are for the few, and you're just background noise in their endless debates. Inside those walls, senators argue about taxes, wars, and grain shipments. Historians still argue whether the Senate retained real power during the empire, or whether emperors merely let them play dress-up with decisions already made. Either way, your life, your bread, your safety, your survival, is tangled in their games, even though you'll never set foot inside. A mainstream fact. The Senate once had hundreds of members drawn from Rome's wealthiest families. Their debates could stretch for hours, voices echoing off marble until they reached no conclusion at all. Imagine hundreds of men arguing whether the empire should wage war in Dacia while you're just trying to stretch a single loaf of bread through the week. On the street, you hear fragments of gossip. One man boasts his cousin knows a senator who can sway decisions. Another sneers that bribery is the only language politicians understand. You realize quickly that politics here isn't about ideals. It's about influence, favors, and family names. Without those, you're invisible. A quirky tidbit. Sometimes senators were mocked in graffiti. You spot one scrawl on a wall, a crude drawing of a donkey wearing a toga. It makes you snort in spite of yourself. The common folk may not have votes that matter, but they do have chalk and an irreverent sense of humor. Still, the divide cuts deep. You shuffle past the rostra, the speaker's platform in the forum, where once fiery orators whipped crowds into frenzy. Now it's mostly symbolic, a reminder of a republic long gone. You picture Cicero thundering there, his words sparking riots, while you stand in the dust centuries later, clutching crumbs. The thought leaves you hollow. As the sun dips lower, you watch a procession of senators glide by in spotless togas, their sandals polished, their faces smug. Behind them trail clients, ordinary Romans hoping for favors, jobs, or even a few coins. You're tempted to join the line, to bow your head and beg for patronage. But your pride stops you. You know what it means to be a client. To wake every morning at your patron's door, to smile, flatter, and grovel just for scraps. Politics in Rome isn't a distant thing. It drips into every corner of your life, even when you want no part of it. Grain, taxes, laws, even entertainment. All decided in halls where you'll never speak. You feel the weight of it pressing on your shoulders, heavier than the breadbasket you carried earlier. You glance back once more at the Senate House, its facade glowing gold in the fading light. It looks magnificent from here, powerful and eternal. But you know better now. Inside, it's just men squabbling over power while the rest of Rome coughs, starves, and trudges through sewage. The empire's fate may be debated in marble halls, but your fate, that's already decided. You're one of the voiceless many, living under rules written by the few. As the sun dips lower, you watch a procession of senators glide by in spotless togas, their sandals polished, their faces smug. Behind them trail clients, ordinary Romans hoping for favors, jobs, or even a few coins. You're tempted to join the line, to bow your head and beg for patronage. But your pride stops you. You know what it means to be a client. To wake every morning at your patron's door, to smile, flatter, and grovel just for scraps. Politics in Rome isn't a distant thing. It drips into every corner of your life, even when you want no part of it. Grain, taxes, laws, even entertainment. All decided in halls where you'll never speak. You feel the weight of it pressing on your shoulders, heavier than the breadbasket you carried earlier. You glance back once more at the Senate House, its facade glowing gold in the fading light. It looks magnificent from here, powerful and eternal. But you know better now. Inside, it's just men squabbling over power while the rest of Rome coughs, starves, and trudges through sewage. The empire's fate may be debated in marble halls, but your fate, that's already decided. You're one of the voiceless many, living under rules written by the few. By the time you leave the shadow of the Senate, the sky is bruised with twilight, and the city feels different. The air cools, but the streets do not quiet. Instead, they throb with a new energy, the rough pulse of the night crowd. Daytime Rome was chaotic enough, but night in the city, that's where you truly test your luck. You cling to the main roads at first, following the flicker of torches mounted on doorways. But every corner hums with tension. Romans knew their streets were dangerous after dark, so much so that the law once forbade carriages and wagons during the day, forcing deliveries, traffic, and clatter into the nighttime hours. You dodge a lumbering ox cart that barrels past, its wheels screeching over cobblestones, drivers shouting curses. The ground shakes beneath your sandals, and for a second, you're sure it'll crush you flat. A mainstream fact. Rome never had streetlights. The city's night was black, broken only by oil lamps and the occasional torch. That left shadows thick enough to hide anyone, beggars, thieves, or worse. Historians still argue whether Rome's night watch, the vigils, were more effective as firefighters or as a police force. But from where you stand, their presence feels thin. You see none of them patrolling, just dark corners and eyes watching. You pull your tunic close and hurry along. A group of rowdy men stumbles out of a tavern, already drunk, their laughter jagged and loud. They size you up, and for a heartbeat, you imagine yourself dragged into an alley. You duck your head and keep moving, heart thumping against your ribs. A quirky tidbit. Some Romans carried amulets at night to ward off evil spirits, little carved phalluses or charms shaped like fists. You pass a vendor packing up his stall, a handful of these charms jangling in a box. For a second, you consider buying one, not for superstition, but just for comfort. But your coin pouch is too light, and comfort here is expensive. Deeper into the neighborhood, the streets narrow. The smells shift, less of bread ovens and sweat, more of sour wine and rot. You step carefully, ears straining, every shuffle and murmur amplified in the dark. Somewhere nearby, a woman cries out, sharp and sudden, then is swallowed by silence. You freeze, every instinct telling you to run. But where? Every path is shadowed, every doorway a trap. You finally catch sight of the Sabura district, the city's notorious underbelly. Taverns glow dimly, brothels hum with muffled voices, dice games clatter on overturned crates. This is the Rome the senators never admit exists, a place where coins, knives, and lives change hands quickly. You're just passing through, but already you feel marked. You edge toward a wider road, muttering silent thanks when you see the glow of a torch carried by a small patrol. The vigils march by, spears in hand, but they don't glance your way. They're not here for your safety. They're here to keep fires from spreading and brawls from boiling too hot. You're still on your own. Night in Rome isn't quiet. It's loud in the worst ways. Shouts echo off walls, dogs bark, carts rumble, drunks sing off key. And beneath it all runs the steady pulse of danger. A reminder that you're one unlucky turn away from vanishing, without anyone asking where you went. You clutch your pouch tighter, quicken your steps, and swear under your breath that if you survive until morning, you'll never leave your lodging at night again. Rome may glitter by day, but after dark, it's a different beast, one that's always hungry, and tonight it nearly swallowed you whole. By the time dawn begins to whisper across the rooftops, your body is exhausted, your mind frayed, and your senses overloaded. The night hasn't been kind. Every shadow, every shout, every stench reminds you of the fragile thread by which you cling to survival in this city. You trudge back toward your lodgings, eyes heavy, limbs sore, hoping to collapse into a bed that may or may not be clean. The first rays of sunlight hit the marble and brick of Rome, revealing the city's contradictions. Statues gleam, fountains sparkle, and yet the streets are littered with debris from yesterday's market and last night's chaos. You stumble over a stray sandal, muttering under your breath, and realize that walking alone in Rome is a careful negotiation with chaos itself. A mainstream fact, Romans woke early to greet the day, the bakers' ovens roaring by midnight to have bread ready by first light. Merchants open their stalls, laborers trudge to construction sites, and the clamor begins anew. You shuffle alongside them, already weary from your own previous day and night. The rhythm of Rome doesn't pause for the tired or the weak. You notice a mother coaxing her child down the street, balancing a basket of food. The kid trips over a stone, yelps, and she yanks him up without missing a beat. Life continues regardless of mishaps, accidents, or complaints. You step carefully, avoiding the puddles of yesterday's rain, grateful for the brief quiet before the city reaches full roar. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind as you pass a street vendor selling freshly baked honey cakes. Some Romans believed that wearing the skin of a sacrificed animal could bring good fortune. You shiver, imagining the ethics of such a superstition, and decide that surviving the day is already magical enough without invoking questionable luck charms. The smell of smoke drifts toward you from a nearby hearth, mingling with the scent of fresh bread. Your stomach growls again, reminding you that even surviving Rome isn't enough. You have to eat. You buy a small loaf from a vendor, clutching it like treasure. Each bite is a small victory, a private comfort in a city that offers few. Historians still argue whether Rome's complexity, its laws, entertainment, markets, and religion, was truly sustainable, or whether the city's very structure invited chaos and peril. Standing in the morning sun, exhausted but alive, you realize you've witnessed both extremes. The grandeur and the danger coexist, inseparable, and you've managed to navigate them, however tenuously. As you round the corner toward your lodging, The streets begin to bustle with full force. People call to each other, animals bray, carts squeal, and the city hums, relentless as ever. You clutch your bread, straighten your shoulders, and take a deep breath. Surviving Rome isn't about glory. It's about small victories, avoiding danger, finding food, keeping your wits about you. You pause briefly, glancing back at the streets behind you. There's beauty in the chaos, but there's also stark, unforgiving truth. This city does not forgive weakness. You step inside your lodging, finally allowing yourself a moment of reprieve. The day ahead will bring more challenges, more sights, more smells. But for now, you've made it this far.